The polished marble floors of the Jordan Grand Hotel in Charlotte reflected the afternoon sun, casting a golden glow on the well-heeled guests who glided through the lobby. Everything about the place whispered of quiet luxury, from the custom-made furniture to the artfully arranged bouquets of fresh flowers that scented the air. It was a world of effortless elegance, a world where problems were solved with a discreet phone call and a platinum credit card, a world that had no place for a man like Samuel Carter. Samuel sat in his worn-out wheelchair near the main entrance, a small, battered suitcase resting on his lap. He had been there for 3 hours, a small, still island in a river of wealth and privilege. His clothes, though clean, were threadbare, and his face was etched with a weariness that went far beyond physical fatigue. Every time he tried to approach the front desk, a polite but firm security guard would intercept him, his voice a smooth, practiced murmur of regret. "I'm sorry, sir, but we are fully booked." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Samuel had called that very morning and been assured there were several suites available. But the moment he had rolled through the revolving doors, his old, squeaky wheelchair, a stark contrast to the silent efficiency of the hotel, the availability, had mysteriously vanished. He wasn't just a man in a wheelchair. He was the wrong kind of man, the kind that didn't fit the carefully curated image of the Jordan Grand. He was a reminder of a world that the hotel's clientele paid a great deal of money to forget. What the staff didn't know was that Samuel wasn't there to beg or to cause trouble. He was there to fulfill a promise. In his pocket, his fingers nervously traced the outline of a faded photograph, a picture of 2 young boys, their arms slung around each other's shoulders. Grinning at the camera from the dusty basketball court of a Wilmington community center, one of those boys was him. The other was Michael Jordan. They had been inseparable as kids, 2 boys from the wrong side of the tracks who found a shared dream on the cracked asphalt of that court. Michael had been the raw talent, the one with the fire in his eyes. Samuel had been the strategist, the one who saw the game in a way others couldn't. He had been Michael's first coach, his first rival, and his first true friend. Then, a car accident had shattered Samuel's leg and his dreams of a basketball career, and their paths had diverged. Michael had soared to unimaginable heights, while Samuel had been left behind, his life a series of quiet struggles and what-ifs. He hadn't seen Michael in over 40 years, hadn't asked for a thing, but now his daughter, Ivy, was sick. A rare genetic condition was slowly stealing her strength, and the doctors had given him a sliver of hope, a new experimental treatment, available only at a specialized clinic in Switzerland. The cost was astronomical, a figure so large it might as well have been a star in a distant galaxy. Samuel had sold everything he owned, but it was a drop in the ocean. He had one last, desperate hope. He had to reach Michael. He had tried every official channel, his letters and emails swallowed by the vast machinery of Michael's fame. Coming here, to the hotel that bore his friend's name, was a last resort, a shot in the dark. He just needed to talk to him, to show him the photograph, to remind him of the promise they had made as boys. "We'll always have each other's backs. Always." As the afternoon light began to fade, a sleek black car pulled up to the hotel entrance. A hush fell over the lobby as the doorman rushed to open the door. Michael Jordan stepped out, his presence filling the space as effortlessly as he had once commanded a basketball court. He was older now, his hair tinged with gray, but he moved with the same quiet confidence that had defined his career. He nodded to the staff, his eyes scanning the lobby, and then he saw him. For a moment, Michael froze, his gaze locked on the man in the wheelchair, and a flicker of recognition, of disbelief, crossed his face. He started to walk forward, a question forming on his lips, but the hotel manager, a man named Henderson, with a practiced smile and cold eyes, intercepted him. "Mr. Jordan, welcome back," Henderson said smoothly, positioning himself to block Michael's view of Samuel. "Everything is in order for your meeting." "Who is that man?" Michael asked, his voice low, his eyes still fixed on Samuel. Henderson's smile tightened. "Just a transient, Mr. Jordan. We're handling it." "Handling it?" Michael repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "He's been sitting there for hours. I saw him when I drove by earlier. Why hasn't he been helped?" "He was requesting a room, but we are at full capacity," Henderson said, the lie slipping out as easily as a well-rehearsed line. Michael's eyes narrowed. He looked from the manager's polished shoes to Samuel's worn-out sneakers, from the security guard's impassive face to the desperation in Samuel's eyes. And in that moment, he saw not a transient, but a story that he was beginning to realize was deeply, inextricably linked to his own. He pushed past the stunned manager and walked toward Samuel. The security guard moved to block him, but a single look from Michael stopped him in his tracks. Michael knelt, bringing himself eye-level with the man in the wheelchair. The lobby had gone silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. "Sam!" Michael's voice was barely a whisper, thick with an emotion that no one in that lobby had ever heard from him before. "Sam Carter? Is that really you?" Samuel looked up, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. He couldn't speak, could only nod, his hand trembling as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded photograph. Michael took it, his own hands shaking slightly, as he stared at the image of two boys who had once believed they could conquer the world. He looked from the photograph to the man in front of him, and the years seemed to melt away. He saw the friend who had taught him his first crossover, who had stayed up all night with him before his first big game, who had believed in him when no one else did. And then he looked at the manager, at the security guard, at the silent, watching guests, and a cold, hard anger rose in him, an anger he hadn't felt since the final seconds of a tied championship game. "This man," Michael said, his voice ringing with an authority that no one dared to question, "is my guest. He is my family. And you," he said, turning to the pale-faced manager, "you are going to give him the best suite in this hotel, the presidential suite, and it will be on the house, for as long as he needs it." The manager stammered, his polished composure cracking. "But Mr. Jordan, the suite, it's reserved for him." Michael cut him off, his voice like steel. "And then you and I are going to have a long talk in my office about what the name Jordan on the front of this building is supposed to mean." He turned back to Samuel, his expression softening. "Come on, Sam. Let's get you settled. We have a lot to talk about." As Michael pushed Samuel's wheelchair toward the elevators, the lobby remained in stunned silence. The guests, the staff, they had all just witnessed something more real, more powerful than any basketball game. They had seen a legend, not of the court, but of the heart. And for a man who had been invisible for 3 hours, for a man who had been denied a place in this world of luxury, the simple act of being seen, of being remembered, was a victory more profound than any championship. The doors of the elevator slid shut, leaving the world of the Jordan Grand to grapple with a lesson it had long forgotten, that true worth is not measured in dollars or in fame, but in the quiet, unbreakable bonds of friendship and the promises made on a dusty basketball court long ago. Inside the hushed quiet of the elevator, the air was thick with unspoken words, with 40 years of silence and separate lives. Samuel Carter stared at the polished brass walls, seeing not his own reflection but the ghost of the boy he used to be, the boy who had dreamed alongside the man now pushing his wheelchair. Michael, for his part, was silent, his hands gripping the handles of the chair with a gentle firmness, as if he was afraid that if he let go, Samuel might disappear again. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor, revealing a private corridor carpeted in a plush, deep blue. At the end of the hall, a pair of ornate double doors stood waiting. Michael used a key card, and the doors swung open to reveal the presidential suite. It was less a hotel room and more a penthouse apartment. A grand piano stood in one corner of a living room, the size of Samuel's entire house. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the Charlotte skyline. A fully stocked kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances, and a dining room table that could seat 12 stood ready for a banquet. This is too much, Mike," Samuel whispered, his voice hoarse. He had never called him Michael, not even when the whole world was chanting his name. To him, he would always be Mike, the lanky kid with a goofy grin and the unstoppable drive. "Nothing's too much for you, Sam," Michael said, his voice still thick with emotion. He wheeled Samuel into the center of the room, then walked over to the windows, his back to his friend for a moment as he composed himself. "I can't believe it's you. After all these years, I looked for you, you know. After the accident, your family had moved. No one knew where you'd gone." "It was better that way," Samuel said, his gaze fixed on his own gnarled hands, resting on the worn arms of his wheelchair. I couldn't face you. You were on your way up, and I was on my way out. I didn't want to be an anchor, Mike. I didn't want to be the guy you had to drag along." Michael turned, his eyes shining with a mixture of anger and regret. "An anchor? Sam? You were my wings. You were the one who taught me how to fly. Do you remember that day at the community center? The older kids wouldn't let us on the court. They said we were too small, too young." A faint smile touched Samuel's lips. "I remember. You were ready to fight them. All 5 of them. And you stopped me," Michael continued, walking closer. "You said, we don't have to fight them. We just have to be better than them. You spent the whole summer with me on that side court, drilling me, pushing me, teaching me that fadeaway jumper. You saw something in me before I saw it in myself. The talent was always there," Samuel said quietly. "I just helped you find the key." "You were the key, Sam," Michael insisted, his voice cracking. He knelt in front of the wheelchair again, just as he had in the lobby, closing the distance between their 2 worlds. "What happened to you?" "The accident." "It was bad. I know. But this." He gestured around the opulent suite, the gesture encompassing not just the luxury but the vast chasm that had opened between their lives. "This isn't just about the accident, is it?" Samuel's gaze drifted to the photograph, which Michael had placed on a nearby table. "Life happens, Mike. It's not always a straight line to the basket. Sometimes you get fouled, and there's no referee to call it." He took a deep, shaky breath, the story he had held inside for so long finally pushing its way to the surface. "After the accident, I couldn't play anymore. The doctors said I'd be lucky to walk without a limp. The scholarship disappeared overnight. My whole world, it just vanished." He told Michael everything, the years of working dead-end jobs, the struggle to support his family, the quiet pride that had kept him from ever reaching out. He spoke of his wife, taken by cancer 5 years ago, and of his daughter, Ivy, the light of his life, who is now fighting her own battle. "She has a rare genetic disorder," Samuel said, his voice breaking as he finally revealed the reason for his desperate journey. "The doctors here, they've done all they can. There's a clinic in Switzerland, a new treatment. It's her only chance." He finally looked Michael in the eye, the shame and desperation he had hidden for so long laid bare. It costs more money than I've seen in my entire life. I sold everything. It wasn't enough. Coming here, it was my last hope. I just wanted to ask you to loan me the money. I'd pay you back, every cent, I swear." Michael listened, his expression unreadable, his jaw tight. When Samuel finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Michael stood up and walked back to the window, his back to Samuel once more. For a long, terrifying moment, Samuel thought he had made a terrible mistake. He had presumed on a childhood friendship, had brought his messy, broken life to the doorstep of a legend, and had been found wanting. "I'm sorry," Samuel whispered, his voice choked with shame. "I shouldn't have come. I'll go." He began to turn his wheelchair, the squeak of the wheels a mournful sound in the vast, silent room. But then Michael spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not going anywhere." He turned, and the look on his face was not one of pity or of charity, but of a cold, focused rage. But the rage wasn't directed at Samuel. "You will not pay me back 1 single cent. You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who's in your debt." He strode across the room and picked up the phone, his movements sharp and decisive. He punched in a number, his thumb jabbing at the keypad. "Get me Henderson. Now." A moment later, the hotel manager's voice, tinny and nervous, came through the speaker. "Mr. Jordan, is everything all right with your guest?" "No, Henderson, everything is not all right. Michael said, his voice like ice. My friend, Mr. Carter, has a daughter who is sick. She needs to get to a clinic in Switzerland. I want my private jet fueled and ready to leave in 2 hours. I want the best medical team you can find to be on that plane. I want the clinic in Switzerland contacted and told to prepare for their arrival. And I want them to know that all expenses will be covered. Indefinitely. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Jordan, I don't know if that's possible on such short notice. Make it possible, Michael snarled. Or, by the time the sun comes up, the name on the front of this hotel will be the only thing you have left of your job. Am I clear? Yes, Mr. Jordan. Crystal clear. The line went dead. Michael slammed the phone down and turned to Samuel, who was staring at him, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with disbelief. Mike, I can't ask you to do that, Samuel stammered. You didn't ask, Michael said, his voice softening as he knelt before his friend once more. I offered. No, that's not right. I'm insisting. You were there for me at the beginning. Now I'm here for you. That's what family does. That's what we are, Sam. We're family. He reached out and placed his hand on Samuel's shoulder, and in that simple touch, 40 years of silence, of regret, of separate worlds were bridged. The two boys from the dusty court in Wilmington were reunited, not as a legend and a broken man, but as they had always been in their hearts, brothers. While the machinery of Michael's empire roared to life, arranging flights and medical teams, the two friends sat in the quiet luxury of the suite and talked. They talked for hours, the stories of their lives spilling out, filling the empty spaces that time had created. Michael spoke of the pressures of fame, the loneliness at the top, the constant struggle to find people he could trust. He confessed that, in the middle of his most celebrated victories, he had often found himself thinking of that dusty court in Wilmington, of the simple joy of playing the game with his best friend. Samuel, in turn, shared the small victories and quiet heartbreaks of his own life. He spoke of the pride he felt watching his daughter grow into a kind and compassionate young woman, of the simple pleasure of a shared meal, of the quiet dignity of a life lived with integrity, even in the face of constant struggle. As they spoke, a young woman in a hotel uniform knocked softly on the door. She was carrying a tray with 2 tall glasses of chocolate milkshake. She looked nervous, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Mr. Henderson sent these up, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He said to tell you he's sorry. Michael looked at Samuel, and a slow smile spread across his face. Thank you, he said to the young woman. You can leave them on the table. After she had gone, Michael picked up the 2 glasses and handed one to Samuel. 2 straws? Samuel asked, a ghost of his old grin returning. Like old times, Michael said, his own smile mirroring his friend's. They sat there, 2 old friends in a palace of a hotel room, drinking their milkshakes and talking about everything and nothing. The city lights began to twinkle on outside the vast windows, but inside the suite, the only light that mattered was the rekindled flame of a friendship that had been forged in the fires of a shared dream. Later, as the final arrangements were being made, Michael's personal physician arrived. He examined Samuel, his expression growing more serious as he reviewed the medical records that Samuel had brought with him. Mr. Jordan, the doctor said, pulling Michael aside. Mr. Carter's condition. It's more than just the old leg injury. His overall health is precarious. The flight to Switzerland will be hard on him. Do whatever it takes, Michael said, his jaw set. He's not going alone. I'm going with him. The doctor looked surprised. But your meetings, your schedule. Cancel them, Michael said without a moment's hesitation. Nothing is more important than this. When Michael told Samuel he was coming with him, his friend protested. You can't, Mike. You have a life, a business to run. My business is my friend's, Michael said simply. And right now, my friend needs me. We started this journey together, Sam. We're going to finish it together. As they prepared to leave, Henderson, the hotel manager, appeared at the door of the suite. He looked pale and shaken, his usual arrogance replaced by a humbling fear. Mr. Jordan, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I want to apologize. To you And to Mr. Carter, there is no excuse for my behavior. I was wrong. Michael studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Why, Henderson? Why did you do it? The manager's gaze fell to the floor. It's the image, the brand. We're trained to protect it at all costs, to create an atmosphere of exclusivity. Mr. Carter, he didn't fit the profile. The profile? Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. Let me tell you something about the profile, Henderson. The name Jordan on that sign outside isn't about luxury cars and expensive suits. It's about a kid from Wilmington who had nothing but a dream. It's about hard work, about overcoming obstacles, about believing in yourself when no one else does. It's about friendship and loyalty and having someone's back no matter what. That man, he said, pointing to Samuel, that man is more a part of the Jordan brand than anyone in this entire hotel. He's the foundation of it. And you didn't see him. Henderson flinched as if he had been struck. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Michael said, his voice softening slightly. Be better. See the person, not the profile. That's the only way you'll ever truly understand what this place is supposed to be about. With that, Michael turned and pushed Samuel's wheelchair out of the room, leaving the chastened manager alone in the opulent suite. As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Samuel looked at his friend, his eyes shining with a gratitude that went beyond words. You know, he said softly, for 40 years, I thought I was the one who got left behind. But maybe we both got a little lost along the way. Michael nodded, a sad smile on his face. Maybe we did, but the important thing is, we found each other again. The lobby was still filled with curious onlookers, but this time, their stares were not of judgment, but of awe. They watched as Michael Jordan, the legend, personally escorted his old, disabled friend out of the hotel and into the waiting ambulance that would take them to the airport. They watched as he gently helped Samuel into the vehicle, his movements full of a care and tenderness that spoke volumes. And as the ambulance pulled away, its lights flashing in the twilight, the guests and staff of the Jordan Grand were left with a powerful, enduring image. Not of a basketball star or a billionaire, but of a man who understood that the greatest luxury in life is not wealth or fame, but the simple, priceless gift of a loyal friend. A man who was willing to stop the world to keep a promise made on a dusty basketball court, a promise to always have his friends back, always. The flight to Switzerland was a surreal experience for Samuel. He had never been on a private jet before, and the sheer luxury of it was overwhelming. The seats were plush leather, the cabin was paneled in rich, dark wood, and a flight attendant was there to cater to their every need. But it wasn't the luxury that moved him. It was Michael's constant, quiet presence. His friend sat across from him, not as a global icon, but as Mike, the kid from the neighborhood. He fussed over Samuel's comfort, making sure his leg was properly elevated, that he had enough pillows, that the cabin temperature was just right. He didn't talk about business or fame. He talked about their childhood, about the silly pranks they had pulled, about the dreams they had shared. He made Samuel feel, for the first time in a very long time, not like a burden, but like a cherished friend. A medical team was on board, a doctor and 2 nurses who monitored Samuel's condition throughout the flight. They were the best in their field, handpicked by Michael, and their professionalism was matched only by their compassion. They spoke to Samuel with respect, explaining every procedure, answering every question, treating him not as a charity case, but as a VIP. As they flew over the Atlantic, the sky a vast, dark canvas studded with stars, Samuel found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in years. He told Michael about the loneliness of his life after the accident, the feeling of being invisible, of being defined by his disability, rather than by who he was as a person. People see the wheelchair first, he said, his voice low. They don't see the man sitting in it. They see what I can't do, not what I can. Michael listened, his expression somber. I never knew, Sam. I was so caught up in my own world. I should have tried harder to find you. It's not your fault, Samuel said, though a part of him had always wondered, had always harbored a small, secret resentment that his friend, who could do anything, had not found a way to reach him. But now, sitting here, seeing the genuine regret in Michael's eyes, that resentment melted away, replaced by a quiet understanding. We were on different paths. You had a world to conquer. But what's the point of conquering the world if you lose your friends along the way? Michael countered, his voice full of a weary wisdom that surprised Samuel. All the championships, all the money, it doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't know your history. It doesn't remember the kid you used to be. They landed in Geneva in the early morning, the Swiss Alps, a majestic, snow-capped backdrop to their arrival. A private ambulance was waiting on the tarmac, and they were whisked away to the clinic, a state-of-the-art facility nestled in a serene, picturesque valley. The clinic was unlike any hospital Samuel had ever seen. It felt more like a luxury spa, with sun-drenched rooms, beautiful gardens, and a staff that treated every patient with a gentle, unhurried kindness. Ivy was already there, having been flown in the day before on a separate medical flight arranged by Michael. The reunion between father and daughter was emotional. Ivy, frail and pale, but with her father's resilient spirit shining in her eyes, wept with joy and relief. "Daddy, I was so scared," she whispered, clinging to his hand. "I know, baby," Samuel said, his own tears flowing freely. "But we're here now. Everything's going to be okay." He introduced her to Michael, and Ivy, who had grown up hearing stories of her father's legendary childhood friend, looked at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but sincere. "Thank you for helping my dad." "Your dad is the one who helped me," Michael said, his voice gentle. "He's the strongest man I know." Over the next few days, as Ivy began her treatment, a new routine settled in. Michael, to the astonishment of the clinic staff, stayed. He postponed his meetings, canceled his appearances, and cleared his schedule indefinitely. He took a room at the clinic, and every day he was there, a quiet, constant source of support for Samuel and Ivy. He would sit with Samuel for hours in the sun-drenched gardens, talking, laughing, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. He would visit Ivy, bringing her small gifts, telling her stories about her father's basketball prowess, making her laugh with his own self-deprecating humor. He was not Michael Jordan, the global superstar. He was Uncle Mike, a role he slipped into as easily as he had once slipped past defenders on his way to the basket. One afternoon, as they were sitting by a small, tranquil lake on the clinic grounds, Samuel turned to Michael, his expression serious. "Why are you doing all this, Mike? I mean, really? The money, I understand. You have more than you could ever spend. But this," he gestured to the idyllic surroundings, to the days that had turned into a week. "Your time. That's the one thing you can't buy more of. Why are you giving so much of it to me?" Michael was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant snow-capped peaks. "Because," he said finally, his voice low and reflective, "it's not about the money. It's not even just about our friendship, as important as that is. It's about balance." He turned to Samuel, his eyes full of an intensity that his friend had not seen since their days on the court. "For years, my life has been about winning, about being the best, about accumulating things, trophies, accolades, wealth. And somewhere along the way, I think I lost sight of what really matters. The scales got unbalanced." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "That day in the hotel lobby, when I saw you, it was like a lightning bolt. It was like the universe was holding up a mirror to me, showing me the man I could have become if things had gone differently. A man who, despite having nothing, had everything that truly mattered: integrity, love, a daughter who adores him. And I, who had everything the world thinks is important, felt empty." He looked at Samuel, his expression raw and vulnerable. "Being here, with you and Ivy, it's like it's recalibrating my soul. It's reminding me of who I was before the world told me who I should be. You're not just my friend, Sam. You're my compass. You're pointing me back to true north." Samuel was speechless, moved beyond words by his friend's confession. He had always seen himself as the one who was broken, the one who needed saving. It had never occurred to him that he, in his own quiet, unassuming way, could be the one doing the saving. As the weeks turned into a month, Ivy's condition began to improve. The new treatment was working. The doctors were optimistic, and a light began to return to her eyes that had been dim for far too long. And as Ivy grew stronger, so did the bond between the two old friends. They fell into an easy rhythm, their days filled with simple pleasures. They would play cards, watch old movies, and take slow, meandering walks through the clinic's beautiful grounds, Michael pushing Samuel's wheelchair. Their conversation flowing as easily as the nearby stream. They were no longer a legend and a forgotten friend. They were just Mike and Sam, two men who had found their way back to each other after a lifetime apart. One evening, as they were watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Michael's phone rang. It was Henderson, the manager from the Jordan Grand. His voice was different, stripped of its usual corporate polish, and filled with a genuine, heartfelt emotion. "Mr. Jordan," he said, "I just wanted to call and thank you. After you left, I did a lot of thinking about what you said, about seeing the person, not the profile. And I changed things." He went on to explain that he had implemented a new training program for the hotel staff, a program focused on empathy and compassion. He had partnered with a local charity to provide rooms for families in need, and he had started a foundation in his own father's name to provide scholarships for underprivileged youth. "You didn't just change Mr. Carter's life that day," Henderson said, his voice thick with emotion. "You changed mine too. You reminded me of the man I wanted to be. Thank you." After he hung up, Michael was silent for a long time, a thoughtful, contemplative expression on his face. "You see, Sam?" he said softly, turning to his friend. "It's a ripple effect. One act of kindness. It doesn't just change one life. It can change the world." Samuel looked at his friend, at the man the world knew as a ruthless competitor, and saw a depth of heart and soul that he had never imagined. He had come to the hotel that day as a beggar, a broken man with a desperate plea. He had been met with scorn and rejection. And then, his old friend had appeared, a force of nature who had not just answered his plea, but had healed his spirit. And in that moment, Samuel Carter realized the truth. Michael Jordan hadn't just given him money, or a private jet, or the best medical care in the world. He had given him something far more precious. He had given him back his dignity. He had given him back his hope. He had given him back his friend. And that was a gift for which there was no price. A gift that would shine brighter than any championship ring. A gift that would last for a lifetime. As Ivy's recovery progressed, the doctors delivered the news they had all been praying for. The treatment had been a success. She would need continued monitoring and care, but she was out of danger. She had been given back her future. The day they left the clinic was a day of quiet celebration. The staff lined the hallways to say goodbye, their faces full of a genuine affection that had grown over the weeks. Ivy, though still frail, was able to walk a short distance with the help of a walker, her smile a beacon of hope. Back in Charlotte, they did not return to the opulent, impersonal world of the Jordan Grand. Instead, Michael took them to a quiet, tree-lined street in a comfortable, suburban neighborhood. He pulled up in front of a beautiful, single-story home, a house with a wide, welcoming porch and a meticulously landscaped yard. A ramp led up to the front door, and the windows were bright and clean. "What's this?" Samuel asked, looking at the house in confusion. "This is home," Michael said simply. "Your home." He explained that he had bought the house and had it completely renovated to be fully accessible for Samuel. It was in a good school district for Ivy, close to the best hospitals, and, most importantly, it was a place where they could start over, a place where they could build a new life, free from the struggles of the past. Samuel was overwhelmed, his protests silenced by the sheer, breathtaking generosity of his friend. "Mike, I can't." "You can," Michael said, his voice firm but gentle. "And you will. I also took the liberty of setting up a trust fund for you and Ivy. You'll never have to worry about money again. You can just live. Be a father, be a grandfather someday." He handed Samuel a set of keys, and as their hands touched, it was not the passing of a charitable gift, but the sealing of a promise. A promise that had been made 40 years ago and had finally, in the most unexpected of ways, been fulfilled. In the months that followed, Samuel and Ivy settled into their new life. The house became a home, filled with laughter and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Ivy, growing stronger every day, returned to school, her future bright with possibility. And Samuel, for the first time in his adult life, found a sense of peace, a sense of security that he had never known. But the story didn't end there. True to his word, Michael remained a constant presence in their lives. He was there for Ivy's school plays, for her soccer games, for her birthday parties. He became a fixture in the neighborhood, a familiar, friendly face, who just happened to be one of the most famous people on the planet. He and Samuel would spend hours on the back porch, drinking iced tea and talking, their friendship a comfortable, easy thing that had been tempered and strengthened by the trials they had faced. They were no longer defined by their pasts, by the divergent paths they had taken, but by the shared present they were building together. One afternoon, Michael arrived at the house with a surprise. He led Samuel to the backyard, where a brand-new state-of-the-art basketball hoop had been installed. "What's this for?" Samuel asked, a smile playing on his lips. "For this," Michael said, handing him a basketball. "You said I was the one with the talent, but you were the one with the strategy. Well, my friend, I've got a new game plan, and I need my coach." He went on to explain that he was launching a new charitable foundation, the Carter Jordan Foundation, dedicated to providing financial and emotional support to families dealing with rare genetic diseases. He wanted Samuel to be its co-director. "You're the heart of this, Sam," Michael said, his voice full of a deep and abiding respect. "You've lived it. You understand it. You can connect with these families in a way I never could. We can do this together. We can make a difference." And so, a new chapter began. Samuel Carter, the man who had once been invisible, the man who had been denied a room because he didn't fit the profile, became a beacon of hope for thousands. He poured his heart and soul into the foundation, his quiet strength and deep empathy, a source of comfort and inspiration to families all over the country. He and Michael traveled together, speaking at fundraisers, visiting hospitals, and offering a hand of support to those in need. They were an unlikely pair, the global icon and the quiet, unassuming man in the wheelchair. But their message was powerful, and their impact was profound. One day, a year after that fateful afternoon in the hotel lobby, they found themselves back at the Jordan Grand, this time as the guests of honor at a gala for their foundation. The lobby was filled with many of the same people who had been there that day, but this time, their stares were not of judgment, but of admiration and respect. Henderson, the manager, greeted them at the door, his smile genuine, his eyes full of a warmth that had been absent before. "Welcome, Mr. Carter, Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice full of a deep and genuine respect. "It is an honor to have you here." As Samuel rolled through the lobby, no one tried to stop him. No one told him they were fully booked. He was no longer an outsider, a problem to be handled. He was a man of purpose, a man of dignity, a man who, with the help of a loyal friend, had turned his own pain into a source of healing for others. Later that evening, as he stood on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces, he saw Michael in the front row, his friend's eyes shining with a fierce, brotherly pride. And Samuel Carter, the man who had once been defined by what he had lost, finally, fully understood the truth. He had not been denied a room that day. He had been given a key to a new life, a new purpose, a new understanding of the incredible, transformative power of a single, simple, and yet profound thing: a friend who has your back, always. If this story of friendship and second chances resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that warms the heart. We would be thrilled to know where you are watching from. So please leave a comment with your city or country. And for another story that will surely inspire you, click on the video that is now appearing on your screen. You won't regret it.